Christmas Day 2004, I traveled to Damba County in western Sichuan to attend the wedding of my friend Zhima's brother. Taking place over 200 miles away from the swarming metropolis of Chengdu, this traditional Tibetan wedding held in the mountainside village of Molo promised to be quite different from any wedding I'd ever attended. More importantly, it promised to be a real display of culture, not a staged presentation like so many I had seen in my recent travels of China's western minority regions. As I watched the wedding preparations take place, observing the women in their traditional garb laughing gaily as they cooked and decorated, I reveled in the glory of having a backstage pass to this authentic cultural display, a spectacle that had proved quite elusive in my previous travels. I had found what I thought to be a people brimming with tradition and authenticity, conscious of their rich cultural heritage, and untouched by the overpowering forces of modernity rapidly reshaping the world around them. This young man, Dongsheng, prepares for his role in the ceremony. Like most other men in this region, Dongsheng has long abandoned traditional garb in everyday life in favor of so-called Han clothing. He relies on the groom's father to help him dress in his traditional outfit. Similar to the style of Tibetan weddings in many other Tibetan regions, the groom's family must send a party to meet the bride. In this case, the bride resides in the higher village of Zuobi, one of 4 vertically stratified villages in Suopo Township, of which Molo is the lowest. Along the way, Dongsheng meets up with several women from the bride's party, and they accompany him the rest of the way to the bride's house, where the first ceremony takes place. After more than 100 guests of the bride are fed lunch, the bridal ceremony begins, in which the bride is blessed by an elder family member before she is sent off to the groom's house. Guests give offering of money along with hara, a traditional Tibetan silk cloth, which are placed around the bride's neck. Once all gifts are given, the bridal party departs for the groom's house. The fact that this girl is marrying into a house down the mountain is not so uncommon. Traditionally in Suopo, as in many other vertically stratified townships in Damba, the economic disparity between the lower and higher villages was very minor, and both men and women would marry up or down the mountain, depending on the conditions of the two families. With the opening up of this region to outside influences and absorption of market economy principles by local villagers, however, the obvious economic advantages of the lower villages make it extremely rare for someone to marry up the mountain. These economic advantages include easier access to transportation, better educational opportunities, and more fertile soil for fruit production. But perhaps the most lucrative new economic advantages for those lower down the mountain is tourism, which has steadily increased since the region first opened to tourism in 1998. Well over 200 people squeeze into the 3 stories of the groom's house, a house claiming over 300 years of history. The young men and women eat dinner on different floors. After dinner, everyone congregates on the 3rd floor for the actual wedding ceremony, hosted by the groom's uncle, the head of Damba's Bureau of Religion. Again, presents of money and hara are given to the couple, whose faces quickly become hidden beneath the thick white layers of silk. After the ceremony is complete and all presents are given, the all-night festivities begin. It was only as I observed the festivities that night that I began to see the pervasive effects of outside influences, both Chinese and foreign. How had these influences penetrated this relatively isolated community? Why were the young people of this community mixing aspects of their traditional dance with Chinese and Western music? And what role had the rapid increase in tourism played in this process of change? This was not entirely the display of authentic culture that I expected to see, and yet at the same time I reminded myself that this was indeed an authentic representation of these people's lives, not a prefabricated display put on for my viewing pleasure. It wasn't until I returned the next summer that I began to investigate the complexity of the modernization process these people are undergoing. and the dilemma with which this process presents them. Damba County is located in Sichuan Province, over 200 miles west of Chengdu in the mountainous eastern part of Ganzi Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture. It is home to around 56,000 people, about 2/3 of which are Tibetan. These Tibetan people in and around Damba are known as Jiarong, a group of people linguistically and culturally distinct from their distant cousins in Tibet proper. The most distinguishing feature of the Jiarong region surrounding Damba, however, has little to do with the people. It is the hundreds of stone towers that rise up out of the steep mountainsides, the remnants of an earlier culture that people know little about, including the Tibetan villagers now living directly beneath these towers. It is these towers that now draw a large number of tourists into the region, and it is these towers that have become synonymous with Damba and the Jiarong people. Much like the many cultures that have converged in Damba over the years, there are 5 major rivers that converge near Damba's county center. These rivers are responsible for the deep, winding valleys that make up the vast majority of Damba's landscape. It is this inhospitable landscape that supported the vast majority of Damba's population for many centuries. However, the steady influx of Han Chinese and commerce into the area over the past half-century has swelled the population of Damba Xiancheng, the county seat that lies in the valley basin on both sides of the Dadu River. This small city is now home to over 3/4 of Damba's population, a large percentage of which are Han Chinese. The city lies in sharp contrast to the many mountainside villages spreading out through the valleys for several miles in all directions, where the population remains by and large Tibetan. Here the lifestyle is almost entirely agrarian, the locals sustaining themselves on their own crops and livestock. For the past 25 years, they've also been able to bring in a very limited cash income from the production of fruit and huajiao that they grow in village orchards, though few families have an annual income exceeding 5,000 renminbi. Since there are few economic opportunities available for these people in Damba, many of them take temporary jobs for paltry wages as miners or laborers outside the county to boost their limited incomes. It is these villages of Damba that have been left behind in China's rapid economic development. And it is to the people of these villages that tourism development in Damba has presented the greatest opportunities and challenges. Damba has been modernizing for some time now. But before 1998, when Damba opened its doors to tourism, change in Damba was much slower, and the places and people existed in their own sort of dynamic equilibrium. It certainly wasn't and probably never was the depiction of Shangri-La that James Hilton based on Joseph Rock's accounts of traveling through this region. But then again, such a society can only exist in isolation. And as our world globalizes and nations modernize, isolation is just one more thing in danger of becoming extinct. But before 1998, the sense of isolation in Damba was certainly more palpable than now. Identity wasn't quite so important because for the most part the people of Damba, whether Han or Tibetan, city dweller or farmer, local or outsider, all lived in the same version of modernity. Once the area opened to tourism, however, people's perceptions of themselves and others began to change. A new modernity began to take shape, especially for the villagers who lived in the shadows of the towers. For these were the people who became the new objects of what sociologist John Urey calls the tourist gaze. Suddenly these people had gone about their agrarian lifestyle trying to make ends meet and with little concern for defining who they were or where these massive towers came from, realized that people would come from all over and pay money to see them and learn about them. As the local government began to realize the potential tourism held for boosting the region's economy and helping the villagers modernize, they developed their own plans for promoting tourism, as this local government official explains.
那么基于这种情况呢，就是县委政府呢，在调整思路的时候，就把旅游业作为就是下一步的就是支柱产业，重点发展旅游业，并且呢，就是把游客60%呢，就是引到乡村，让他们感受我们浓郁的嘉绒藏族风情。然后另一方面呢，就老百姓通过民居接待呢，就可以增收致富，是这样的。
To this end, the local government designated a few model villages throughout Damba that they felt would be the most authentic representation of Jiarong farming culture. Their prized tourist development project to date is the village of Jiaju, located several miles north of Damba city. Looking out over the village scenery, the clusters of pristine white houses and well-manicured fields make it look like the stereotypical Tibetan village. Though I had no idea what the village looked like in its pre-tourism days, I had the feeling of being in a museum, where the villagers lived in a sterilized, government-issued version of what their lives should be like. While slightly disconcerting to me, a somewhat typical Euro-American tourist in search of unearthed authenticity, I reminded myself that this is the kind of site that many rich Han Chinese tourists expected to find in minority areas. Professor Xu-Jun, however, herself Han Chinese, disapproves of such ostentatious displays, claiming that they are a perversion of original local culture, and yet one more way that locals are forgetting who they are. She made her opinions known to the locals when we arrived at the gate of the village and realized there was an entrance fee.
你要么我们那边说破也是对外接待，你们说家居人绝对不会跟你要票，哪会跟你要票嘛？没给一张，没给一张票。不，你这卖一张反而不好向领导交代。我跟你说，不是我们不愿意卖，你咋向领导交代？你4个人就卖一张，你就跟他说清楚一张。现在你们现在搞旅游已经忘了自己是谁了啊？
我是张主任，我知道我叫什么名字，真的。
你们藏族，你们现在的所有的那个方式方法，都是对一般的旅游者来说的，所谓16免疫啊。
这个不关我们的事，你们去跟领导说，这个不关我们事。
好吧，好吧。人家都让我跟你说，好吧。
The government selected several Jiaju families to receive loans for the construction of new houses in which to host tourists, although most families still worked and slept in their old residences. These new houses they constructed were more colorful and extravagant than the other houses in the village, sharing many similarities to Lhasa-style architecture. This is Ajilamo, one of the very lucky locals selected for a government loan, which she used to build a new house 4 years earlier. With the help of her daughter-in-law, she offers meals and housing to tourists. However, she still lives and raises animals in her old house.
这个房子就是县上的嘛，我们账还完了就是属于我们的了。
哦，对，是县上的。
就这个哦。
建了多久这个房子
？4年了嘛。
4年了。
啊，已经4年了。哦。这是专门给接待修的。 老家就为出生啊这些，这就不为出生了，这为出生就臭了，有苍蝇多，就现在就不为出生，以后没有利润就可以为出生。
我们可不可以到你老房子去看看呢？
老房子太撇了，脏得很，
没关系，没关系，我们去看。
She finally relented and took us to her old house, which was actually quite tidy and clean. It turned out that when Ajalamo originally hosted tourists in her old house, many of them looked down on the base furnishings, the strange smells inevitable in a farming household, and the lack of a flushing toilet.
有些他那个，有些好像是看不起糯米吧？他说：“哎呦，好个臭味儿啊，他们臭的，这样子白气。”
就是，我觉得你们厕所还是很干净。
有些说干净，有些说不干净，臭得很，很臭，臭得要死了。
Ajalamu, like many other villagers, had become self-conscious of these things through her interactions with tourists. We visited another house in the neighboring village of Niega and got a similar reaction from the old Tibetan woman there.
要不要睡在这旁边呢？
这个不睡了，这个地下不睡了，地下睡了就太脏了。不给洗澡。
以前你年轻的时候要睡吧？
年轻的时候睡哦，这没睡了20年样子，又不是前头是这个样子，在地铺罢了就睡。
Thus, the tourist gaze had amplified an already existing belief amongst these simple villagers that they were less modern than these sophisticated visitors from the outside. And in so doing, it encouraged these villagers to put on an altar display in the form of the more commonly idealized Lhasa style of Tibetanness in new houses. Local government support for these cleaner and prettier houses for tourists only reinforces the villagers' belief in an alternate modernity, one defined not by their own experiences and culture, but by how outsiders view their culture based on their own version of modernity. One of the potential drawbacks to these model villages created by the local government is that they can create what cultural geographer Timothy Oakes calls a hierarchy of authenticity, in which the villages begin to vie for government projects and contracts on the basis of how authentic they are. Oakes found this phenomenon to be quite prevalent in the minority village tourist development projects in Guizhou province, many of which began developing in the late 80s. Villages not receiving government support or approval were somehow deemed not authentic enough, both by the government agency and subsequently by other villages. Not only does this breed discord within these communities, it also encourages these lesser villages to try and copy the design set forth by the state through their model villages, in turn promoting the alteration of the indigenous culture to match the expectations of tourists as defined by the local or provincial government. Development in Damba is still in its infant stage, but already such effects can be seen back in Molo. Jima's house, centrally located in Molo and surrounded by 3 towers, sees a fair share of tourists. Her family has posted a sign outside the door advertising a 2 yuan entrance fee to the house, and a 5 yuan fee to put on their traditional clothing and take pictures. Having heard rumors of the success of Jiaju's villagers, though, Jima's newly married brother has bigger plans for the house.
但最关键那个房子有200-300年历史，你要抬高的话，原来那个门只有那么高，那个门不是也要给取掉？
取掉没了。
那取掉那个房子都没意思了。
也是，我觉得就是稍微
装修一下，稍微装修一下，
里面可以装修一下。
对外部民族化嘛，人现在外面让别人看的，如果都是这样，那有什么意思啊？你像家具，你看他们就统一的，所谓的规划好了，就统一的每年刷一下这个白色的白粉，外面看一样。然后第一次来的人觉得还新奇，然后第2次来觉得没有藏族味道，跟内地生活差不多。你像你们家那个门，每个人从那碰一下头就是一种感觉，真的是啊，就是要那种感觉，不小心被碰头了，他们印象很深的。这藏族的他们住的那么矮的，这个就是他们传统的生活状态。你们那个寨子里面都认为。就修跟这家房子这样的那一家特别漂亮，实际上是不好的。我如果是旅游局的，我就不允许他在你们寨子上修。
The Molo house of which Shujun is speaking is this hostel in the lower part of the village. A retired school teacher built this house several years ago when tourists first started pouring into the area. Some Molo villagers have begun to copy the decorations of this hostel, which were done by an artist from the distant town of Dega on the Tibetan border.
我们现在丹巴有一个从德格来的一个画匠，是在丹巴办了个店，开了个店，他自己请一个木工做，然后他画。
他画的是德格那边的风。
这些东西，这个藏族来讲的话，藏族的传统是这种都差不多的，画的时候啊。 这是我们德格跟我们不同的在，就是房子这个造型不同。
游客到你们这来，觉得都很满意吗？
他们每个游客都比较满意。他说来得好，因为我来晚上又爱吹牛皮跟他们，他们觉得挺亲爱。
This is Jima's uncle's house. Located just above Molo in the village of Zolbi, it is the highest house in Solpo Township licensed by the county government to host tourists. Jima's uncle converted several rooms into guest rooms, decorating them much more colorfully than the rest of the house. To many of the ceilings he added tinghuaban, ornately painted roofs popular in Tibet proper. He decorated the outside of the house with colorful Tibetan prayer flags. And now he plans to make an addition to the house in order to add more tourists. As chief of Damba's Bureau of Religion, he also notes that it's not only people's houses that get changed for the sake of attracting tourists.
经常有人那个旅游者来说，哎呀，你们是藏族，咱没有庙子呢，你们凭在哪赚经呢？所以他们想到，哎呀，旅游者天天这样问，他们也想修了，旅游者来有一个多一个游玩的地方，有没有这种想法？除了他自己赚，也有这种想法，就是满足旅游者的那种好奇的愿望。
啊，我们那儿他们现在地下修个塔子出来。 那个也是嘛，
也是为了满足旅游者。
从地下城北那看，和到处看那个宝宝是看得到的。
哦，可以看到。肯定也是为了旅游。
哦，为了旅游。
觉得一到藏区就看到塔。
对的。
就觉得到了藏区。
藏区去了以后，一个是塔子，一个是庙子嘛。
那样的话，就从外面从河对面一下就看到了。
看得到。
啊，除了看了碉楼以外，还有塔子嘛。
塔子嘛。
看上去比较好看嘛。
This family did more than just decorate their house. They decorated the tower connected to their house, letting tourists know that it is open to climb. They charge a 10 yuan fee per person to climb to the top.
前几年好像没看到飘这个彩旗。
没有飘，今年才飘的。
啊，今年才飘上的。有这个彩旗是不是效果好一些？来的人多一些。
他们知道就可以上来了，就过来。
哦。你们投资修这个是自己投资吗？还是县里拨的钱？
我们出一半，县里出一半。
总共花了有多少钱？你们自己？您自己花了？我们
自己花了2、3千，还是木头全部是我们自己出的，现金是2、3千。
你现在这个一年的旅游收入占就是，整个经济收入有多少？比方说核桃啊、花椒啊，一年能卖多少钱
？2、3千吧。
苹果什么加起来
？2、3千。
这个靠这个碉楼发展旅游一年能不能收入5、6千块钱？
收不了，还是2、3千一年。今年才开始啊。
往年
是没有很多的，因为没有票坐不起。
也不知道可以上来。
As more and more tourists pour into the area, the people of Molo and other villages continue to adjust their homes and their lifestyles to accommodate tourists. While the county government continues to support the drastic changes, and Shujun continues to denounce them, another important figure with both the support of the local government and the villagers proposes a slightly different plan. A former French polo star turned philanthropist, Frédéric d'Aragon founded the Unicorn Foundation in 2001 to help preserve the towers in and around Damba and improve educational conditions in the region. She is also a firm believer in sustainable tourism, and thinks that making the towers the focus of tourism might solve many problems.
I was just thinking of studying the tower for my own knowledge and then filming a documentary. And then I realized that the towers would be the perfect way to develop a sustainable tourism in the area, because we had something to show. See, most of the minorities, they just have their custom. Well, their customs are great, but the problem with just the custom, like how you dance and sing and the clothes, they have a tendency to be very easily, how would you say, transform into a kind of a Disneyland show. It's easier to develop tourism around something like the towers than just around custom that obviously might change and will change and might not even be the original ones. We don't really know. What we want to develop is expensive people who are willing to pay a lot of money for an experience they cannot forget. You know, we're willing to pay, $100 per day or $50 per day. That's a lot of money for the local people. And that will give those people pride in what they have. And then they're going to want to protect it.
The problem with Frédéric's plan, and with current development trends in places like Molo, is that the towers are not evenly distributed within villages. And in drawing tourists in solely to see the towers, An economic disparity begins to develop between those living close to the towers and those living far away. Already in Molo, this has begun to create inequalities. This family, closely related to the recently married couple, lives outside the village center away from the towers, where few travelers venture.
你们家平时有没有接待啊？
没接待，我们条件比较差，他们掉的附近的会接待，我们这边严一点。
就是这几年发展旅游，你们家基本没有什么收入。
是旅游个上我们得不得啥子钱，什么得什么收入？
基本上都没得过钱。
啊，没得过钱。我现在看来，他们比较多的就是杨祖他们家，在我们二兄弟他们家，在这个长明他们家，沿海的老书记他们家，在家国也可以，杨国他们家，这些家是真的比较多。
那你们现在有没有考虑，怎么打算，把家里收拾一下，或者什么，将来接待旅游？
想到我们经济困难了，就想不起。
Ironically, the local government's idea of having an entrance fee, which Xu Jun was so quick to criticize, turns out to be a partial solution to this problem.
现在我们许多景区是收门票，门票的话，下午有这个打算，就说是按%多少来分成，一部分就是作为财政，给财政做贡献，那么另一部分，剩下的一部分就作为整个农户就入股的形式，你每家每户都会有股，那么你的这个股根据你的，就是应该说是你在这个旅游中表现出来的行为是直接相关的，比如说你环境不好，或者你有什么社会治安方面的问题，都会相应的扣减你的那个股份，就会有这种打算。
这个想法很好，就是农民可以通过这个至少门票有一点收入，每家每户。
So what is the best route for these people to take in their quest for modernity? Should they be allowed to freely develop tourism, even if it means sacrificing their authenticity and tradition for the sake of modernizing? Will these people really forget who they are, as Xu Jun suggests? Should we follow her line of reasoning and ask these people to be living museums, to not pursue our version of modernity that we've forced upon them simply so we can have a subaltern view in relief to our own modernization? Or should we adhere to Frederick's plan to bring sustainable tourism to the region by attracting rich tourists to see towers at the risk of creating vast inequalities between villagers? Or should we follow the local government's plan to evenly distribute income from tourism by turning select local villages into theme parks with entrance fees at the risk of creating a hierarchy of authenticity? What about the local people? What do they think? Well, we know what Jima's brother thinks. He and his wife will eventually inherit the house and make the changes they want to attract more tourists. By that time, who knows what changes tourism will have affected in the region. Perhaps the local government will have converted Molo into a tourist attraction, or perhaps Frederick will have built a massive hotel. Whatever the case may be, this newlywed couple will constantly be battling the paradoxical forces of modernization that affect us all in one way or another. But we can hope that in the process they will not forget who they are, and instead discover who they are not, and be content in that discovery.